Greetings, everyone. I'm experiencing a considerable amount of unease at the moment because I can't seem to find my boyfriend. Our home is completely devoid of his presence, and I mean every single trace of him is gone. While I acknowledge this might sound unbelievable, I assure you it's the truth, and I'm not exaggerating. I genuinely have no idea where my boyfriend could be, and it's causing me significant distress. How does one even begin to rationalize the disappearance of their partner? I'm hesitant to jump to conclusions and label him as missing just yet, but the circumstances surrounding his absence are undeniably suspicious, leaving me utterly bewildered. There's a chance that I might bear some responsibility for this perplexing situation. Allow me to provide you with some context. My name is Serena, and I'm a 24-year-old massage therapist. My boyfriend's name is Nate, and we've been in a relationship for approximately 2 years. Our journey together began when I gave him a massage, and our connection has been intense ever since. We became so close that we eventually decided to move in together. Nate is an accountant, and he's incredibly dedicated to his work. When we chose to share an apartment, I initially had concerns about the cost, as it was more expensive than the very affordable one I lived in previously. However, Nate insisted on getting the pricier apartment. Like I mentioned earlier, I work as a massage therapist, which means I make a living, though not as much as an accountant. My income depends on the number of massages I give, so if I have an off day with clients, you can probably imagine the financial impact. At first, I wasn't willing to commit to a highly expensive apartment, but Nate persuaded me otherwise. However, don't assume Nate handled all the bills himself. He's not the type to think women shouldn't contribute financially. You could describe Nate as quite thrifty, but in his view, he considers himself financially prudent. We split all apartment expenses equally, while he does give me gifts and takes me out. All other financial aspects are divided evenly. He's not one to heavily invest in a relationship. He didn't explicitly state this, but I picked up on it from his actions. So if you thought I hit the jackpot by dating an accountant, you'd be mistaken. As I mentioned, the apartment is excessively expensive and already furnished, so we didn't need to buy furniture. Our focus was on personal items to make the apartment our own. That's just a brief introduction, folks. Now let me address the urgent issue that's been keeping me awake at night. I've honestly spent sleepless nights grappling with this particular problem, trying to figure out what went wrong and why he left so suddenly. At first, I tried to deny the truth. Yes, I had a suspicion about the possible cause, but I simply didn't want to accept it. I still firmly believe there's no way Nate could have discovered that I cheated on him. It was a one-time occurrence that happened in the heat of the moment. Since he wasn't present, I genuinely believe it can't be the reason for his sudden departure without any prior notice. If you're wondering why I can't just call him, it's because he blocked me. My boyfriend blocked me out of the blue without any warning. Initially, I suspected something might have gone wrong and considered filing a missing persons report, but I paused that idea because I truly believe that if something were amiss, he wouldn't have had the time to neatly pack his belongings and then block me. I understand most of you are eager to know the details of my confession about cheating on Nate. I'm eager to share the truth as well. I can't be sure if that's the reason for his sudden disappearance, and I desperately hope it isn't because that would mean my life is essentially ruined. Losing Nate is not an option. I love him dearly. Even though my confession is belated, it's genuine. I love him with all my heart, and I can't bear to lose him. The cheating was unplanned, it just happened, and it means nothing. I need to inform his family about the situation immediately, so please bear with me, folks. I'll provide an update as soon as I can. Update 1, I'm back, everyone. I understand not all of you will miss me. Who would miss someone in my situation, right? Some of you have been referring to me unkindly in the comments, which I find a bit rude. But I suppose I deserve it. I admit to cheating with his boss, and that's not acceptable. But some have been quite harsh, even going so far as to call me derogatory names. Seriously, I only cheated with his boss, nothing more. It was the first time I ever engaged in such behavior, and I genuinely regret it. I'm determined never to repeat such a mistake. I visited Nate's family, and the encounter was the most intense and dramatic experience of my life. I'll share the details later, but first, let me explain how I ended up involved with Nate's boss. I work as a massage therapist, and my profession involves intimate interactions at times. I want to clarify that I'm being honest here. Massage therapy entails physical contact with clients, and it can occasionally become intimate, whether intentionally or not. Maintaining professionalism is essential to ensure things don't cross boundaries. If you're already guessing that I provided a massage to his boss, you're correct. Nate has always had reservations about my job, and he strongly dislikes the fact that I'm a massage therapist. He has expressed his disapproval multiple times. I've argued that it's unfair for him to belittle my profession, especially considering that my job was the reason we initially crossed paths. He visited the establishment where I worked and received a massage from me. He enjoyed it and returned for a second session, explaining that his demanding role as an accountant left him in need of stress relief. Part of my role as a massage therapist is helping clients alleviate stress, which provides me with a deep sense of satisfaction. That's why I've continued in this profession. Our bond grew during his sessions, ultimately leading to us exchanging contact information and starting our relationship. However, Nate became increasingly bothered by the potential for intimate sessions in my line of work. I consistently reassured him of my professionalism and commitment to maintaining boundaries. Convincing him was challenging because Nate is a highly independent and steadfast individual. By the way, have I mentioned his nosy sister, Elena? She strongly disapproved of my occupation and frequently accused me of infidelity, but that's a tale for another time. I never had the chance to meet Nate's colleagues at his workplace because neither of us saw a pressing need for it. It was never a topic of discussion since we were both engrossed in our respective jobs. However, about 3 weeks ago, Nate and I attended a party where coincidentally some of his coworkers were also present. It turned out to be his boss's birthday celebration organized by his colleagues. Nate hadn't originally planned to attend because he had promised to take me to a club on that same day. Unaware of his boss's birthday event, I felt remorseful when I learned about the party and didn't waste time apologizing, both to Nate and the entire group. Feeling responsible for the incomplete celebration, I'm just like any woman who occasionally makes demands on her boyfriend without considering his prior commitments. His colleagues, in a bid to ease my guilt, reassured me and even jokingly suggested I was overreacting. Part of my regret stemmed from recalling that when I initially asked Nate, he had committed to spending that day with me, but I had disregarded his intentions. Nate's boss introduced himself as Cole, shaking my hand and reassuring me that there was no need to apologize. Curious about my profession, he inquired, and I responded that I worked as a massage therapist. However, the moment those words escaped my mouth, I could sense Nate's simmering frustration. Initially, I couldn't fathom why he was upset, but it later dawned on me that he had a strong aversion to my job and likely felt uneasy about revealing my profession to his colleagues. Conversely, his coworkers, including his boss, reacted quite differently. They displayed genuine interest and curiosity, questioning why Nate hadn't mentioned my profession earlier. Some even made playful comments about scheduling appointments with me, but we all shared a laugh, assuming it was all unjust. I couldn't fathom why his colleagues would genuinely consider booking a massage with me, but Nate didn't share my perspective. His body language suddenly shifted, and he became visibly tense and agitated. Eventually, he reprimanded his colleagues, instructing them to drop the idea of seeking massages from me. Upon returning home, I confronted Nate about his overreaction, failing to comprehend what had prompted it. I genuinely saw no issue with his colleagues' comments, and I couldn't grasp why he had reacted so strongly. I wanted to avoid being the source of workplace conflict for him. After all, I was the only woman among a group of men, and it was common for them to get carried away and make light-hearted remarks. Nate made it clear that he found their comments disrespectful, and I refrained from saying more to avoid offending him. I preferred to leave it at that. In my mind, it was nearly a joke, and I didn't entertain any other thoughts. So it came as quite a shock when I realized they weren't joking, especially Cole. Seeing him at my workplace was entirely unexpected, like a surprising plot twist. You might be wondering how he knew where I worked, and I should clarify that I had mentioned it at the club during our introduction. Before anyone labels me a pick-me girl in the comments for doing so, let me explain that I was looking out for my own interests and those of my workplace. We operate on a commission basis, and if I heard potential clients inquiring about where to find me, I'd provide the information. There are other massage therapists at the same location who could attend to them, so I saw no harm in it. Approaching Cole, I asked what had brought him to my workplace, genuinely curious about his unexpected presence. He explained that he'd had a particularly stressful day at work and wanted to unwind. Surprisingly, he'd never experienced a professional massage before and thought it would be a good time to give it a try. He wanted to support the establishment where I worked, which was the reason for his visit. Cole ended up causing a positive stir at my workplace, creating a pleasant disruption of sorts. He's undeniably attractive, actually very attractive. I'm not concealing what I know to be true. Some of my female friends found him appealing and weren't shy about it. However, they were already occupied with other clients, leaving me as the only available option. Initially, I tried to decline, fearing the consequences if my boss or any superiors found out. I couldn't leave a customer waiting when I had no other appointments. Having just completed a session with another client, I was the sole available massage therapist. I attempted to persuade Cole to wait for one of the other massage therapists, but he explained that he had an urgent commitment elsewhere. Reluctantly, I proceeded to provide the massage. To my surprise, he left that day after generously tipping me $50. I was taken aback and even declined the tip at first, but he insisted. When I returned home, I couldn't bring myself to tell Nate that his boss had visited my workplace and received a massage from me. I feared it would trigger his anger and lead to an argument. Since I considered it a one-time occurrence, I opted to keep it to myself. I believed there was no need to disclose it to Nate because I was simply doing my job as a professional. I saw nothing wrong with fulfilling my duties. With years of experience as a massage therapist, I didn't feel apprehensive about the situation. 1 week later, Cole unexpectedly paid another visit. It was surprising, but I had to fulfill my professional obligations once again. The only difference this time was that Cole and I ended up going to his apartment after the session. Yes, go ahead and label me a pick-me girl or worse. Things took an unexpected turn, and I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. It spiraled out of control far beyond my expectations. Initially, it was just a routine session, but I can't even bring myself to articulate the details. During our professional sessions, taking things to another level is strictly prohibited. However, Cole extended an invitation to his apartment. I was initially captivated by his appearance, and I allowed myself to be influenced by how my colleagues admired him. I must admit that I engaged in something very foolish. We became intimate, and I ended up betraying Nate. It felt like a shock of icy water had been thrown on me once it was all over. I realized that I had cheated on my boyfriend with his boss. Utterly crazy and incredibly foolish. Initially, I contemplated confessing to Nate. But then I remembered how angry he had become at the mere thought of me massaging his colleagues. I had to consider how he would react upon discovering that I had been intimate with his boss. No, I couldn't do it. So, I opted to keep my mouth shut. Cole also urged me to keep it a secret. He assured me it was a one-time occurrence, and I needn't fear Nate finding out. He promised to keep it confidential if I agreed to do the same. Naturally, I consented because I had no intention of divulging the truth to Nate. Who was I kidding? If I had spilled the beans, he would have ended our relationship on the spot. I knew Nate well, and I was fully aware that he was a pragmatic man, not one to be described as a hopeless romantic. Nate's decisions were guided by logic rather than emotion, which is why, when it came to financial matters, he took a practical approach. I was well aware that I wasn't in a fairy tale romance, so I never considered myself a Disney princess with an irresistible, unbreakable charm. When I returned home that day, I acted as if nothing had occurred, despite harboring a tremendous sense of guilt. I made an effort to maintain my composure and feign normalcy. Therefore, it was rather surprising when I arrived home just a week ago and discovered Nate's absence. It felt incredibly odd. I was so consumed by my guilt that I failed to notice Nate had begun distancing himself. I only became aware of this as I write these words now. On that particular day, I came home and prepared dinner as usual well in advance. Nate typically returned home hours after my arrival because of his late work hours. I waited for nearly 7 hours, but he never showed up. Yes, it's not a joke. I became increasingly shocked and concerned, prompting me to call him, only to realize that he had blocked my calls. I ventured into our bedroom hoping to find a note from him, but there was nothing there except for the eerily empty closet. I hadn't even noticed that his side of the closet had been vacant before. Everything was gone, and I began to question my own sanity. But it was undeniable. I attempted to reach him through 2 different phone numbers, but I was blocked on both. That's the extent of it, folks. He simply vanished without warning. During the initial 5 days before I decided to share my story on Reddit, I didn't believe it had anything to do with my infidelity. I never fathomed the possibility of him discovering my secret. However, after posting on Reddit, I started considering the likelihood that he had indeed uncovered the truth. My doubts were further dispelled by his family. As I mentioned at the beginning of this update, I visited Nate's family, but it didn't go well at all. It had been 5 days without any word from Nate, so I felt it was the right time to confide in his family. Initially, I refrained from discussing the situation with them to avoid raising alarms. But as things spiraled out of control, I believed it was crucial to inform them. However, Nate's family's response was incredibly cold and unwelcoming. I almost considered leaving the moment I entered their house. His sister, who already disliked me, relished the opportunity to express her disdain when she learned about my infidelity. Yes, she was aware of it without me having to admit it. All I mentioned was that Nate had disappeared from our home, and I couldn't reach him on his phone. Strangely, they seemed prepared for my visit, as if they had been anticipating it. His sister labeled me a loose girl and emphasized that she had always warned Nate against dating a massage therapist, predicting it would lead to regret. She derided my profession, claiming I had no real job, and demanded that I leave their house. I attempted to converse with Nate's mother and inquire if Nate had been in touch with them, but she also displayed a strong dislike for me. Even his younger siblings showed no interest in engaging with me. Consequently, I was swiftly ushered out of the house without gaining any insight into my boyfriend's whereabouts. Although I now know that Nate is aware of my cheating, I can't help but wonder where my boyfriend is. In my second update, this question continues to haunt me. Update 2, I find myself without a boyfriend. I've been dumped, rendering me single. I suppose this outcome doesn't come as a surprise to many of you. It was something I had coming, and deep down, I was aware of it all along. However, I chose to feign ignorance and deny the reality of the situation. If you're curious about what triggered my downfall, it was my own doing. I suspected that Nate had returned to his previous apartment because it seemed unlikely that his family knew about our situation without his involvement. It indicated that he hadn't gone far and was likely still in town. I went to his old apartment, and just before he left for work in the morning, I unexpectedly ran into him. Fortunately, I knew the exact time he headed to work. I had never considered visiting his workplace because I wanted to avoid any embarrassment of encountering his boss and colleagues, who were likely already aware of the situation. Nate was incredibly cold and exhibited rudeness towards me. He didn't allow me the opportunity to speak, he simply declared the relationship over and expressed his desire to end it. According to him, he couldn't continue dating someone who had cheated on him with his boss. I pleaded with him to reveal how he had discovered my infidelity, and it turned out he had enlisted some of my colleagues at work to keep an eye on me following Cole's birthday celebration at the club, where some of his colleagues had expressed interest in receiving a massage from me. Nate had asked a few individuals he was acquainted with at my workplace to inform me if anything suspicious occurred. As you may recall, Nate had been a regular visitor to my workplace, which is where we initially met, so he already had friends there who helped him gather this information. I must admit I was quite careless to forget that I was known as a married woman by everyone, and to make matters worse, I introduced Cole to my colleagues as my husband's boss. Evidently, Nate confronted Cole just 3 days after obtaining this information and managed to record Cole's confession. Cole, in a foolish move, admitted the truth after Nate resorted to threats and intimidation. Subsequently, Nate reported Cole to the HR department before vacating our apartment. If you're wondering why he didn't simply ask me to leave, it's because our rent was already due for renewal, and he had no intention of extending it, so he departed. Regrettably, I renewed the lease with some of my savings 3 days after Nate abruptly disappeared, holding on to the hope that he would eventually return. Consequently, I now find myself financially strained, residing alone in an expensive apartment. Let's not forget to mention that I'm also single. Upon revealing everything to me, Nate sternly warned me never to attempt contacting him again. Just yesterday, I learned from a friend that following Nate's initial report to the HR department, Cole denied the allegations. Subsequently, the HR summoned both of them for further discussion, and it was during this meeting that Nate provided the recorded confession from Cole regarding our involvement. As I've mentioned before, Nate is always strategic in his thinking. Initially, he deliberately withheld the evidence because he was confident that Cole would deny everything. Had Cole admitted his actions initially, the HR might have issued a mere apology or perhaps suspended him for a few weeks. However, since Cole initially lied to them and was subsequently proven guilty with evidence, he was demoted to a lower position due to his behavior being deemed disruptive and detrimental to work productivity and a harmonious work environment. I heard that Cole couldn't bear the humiliation of his demotion, so he chose to resign to preserve his ego. Well, that's not my concern because I suppose both of us received the consequences we deserved. Despite the self-loathing and regret I feel for my poor choices, I take solace in knowing that Nate received the justice he deserved and won't have to continue working with the man who took his girlfriend away. I deeply apologize for bringing shame and embarrassment to him, and I live with the remorse of my actions each day. Nevertheless, it's a situation that cannot be changed. Alright, that was a fun story, now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Over 5 years ago, I went through a divorce with my ex-wife due to her repetitive infidelity with more than 13 different men and 2 women. To provide some context, my ex and I used to engage in swinging activities until the final year of our marriage. However, the situation took a turn for the worse, and I decided to cease swapping partners. Unfortunately, she disagreed with me and continued having secret encounters with other men. Around 6 months before our divorce, our oldest child received a diagnosis of a life-threatening illness. I won't delve into the specifics to protect my privacy. The stress took a toll on her, leading to excessive drinking, which posed risks to both herself and our children. The situation deteriorated to the point where I temporarily moved out of our home, taking our kids with me. During this period, my ex's best friend, whom we'll call Amy, approached me. My ex had confided in her about her unfaithful actions during a recent girls' night out. She revealed that she had been engaging in nightly liaisons with different men while consuming alcohol, all while caring for our children. Shockingly, she also confessed that she had left our 3-year-old and 4-year-old kids alone at home one night a month earlier while they were asleep just to meet a man. Amy informed me that my ex had intentions of filing for divorce after extracting more money from me while residing in my home without paying rent. Both Amy and I found this appalling and knew we had to put an end to it. My ex had a strong aversion to living under the same roof as me, as she genuinely despised me and wanted to continue her liaisons with her group of overly eager admirers. We needed a plan to evict her from the house and document her inappropriate behavior to limit her custody rights over our children. As the first step, I returned to the house and settled down on the bed right next to her. She reacted by insisting that I leave the house immediately and threatened to call the police if I refused. Unbeknownst to her, I was discreetly recording our conversation. I firmly stood my ground, and she proceeded to call the police, accusing me of domestic violence. The police arrived swiftly and placed me in handcuffs. However, I later played the recording for the detective, which increasingly fueled his anger toward my ex. Eventually, our roles were reversed, and she found herself in handcuffs. They escorted her to a squad car, and she spent the night in jail. She stayed with Amy for the following week since she was not permitted to return to our house due to the restraining order I had obtained. During this week, she engaged in an extensive shopping spree, purchasing a new laptop, a brand new iPhone at its full retail price, and a fresh wardrobe. She emptied our joint bank account and began tapping into my personal savings. Amy confirmed that she was excessively drinking at her place to the extent that she vomited and had an accident in her bathroom. Amy thought it prudent to capture her intoxicated state on video for future reference and provided me with a 20-minute recording of her displaying severe drunkenness the next day. I withdrew all the funds from our savings account and transferred them to my new bank account to cover our expenses. Subsequently, I closed that account to prevent any overdraft protection, thereby avoiding any financial burdens. I also closed all our shared credit cards and shifted my investment accounts into an account under my sole name. She eventually discovered these actions, and while I held no affection for my ex, I had no desire to see her cause harm to herself. As she confided in Amy that she had contemplated self-harm due to the dire situation she found herself in, Amy successfully persuaded her to seek assistance, and they both checked her into an inpatient mental hospital. This proved to be a positive step as it provided her with the necessary help, but it also underscored the fact that she posed a danger to herself and the children. The final phase of our plan was now ready to be set into motion. I consulted my attorney to initiate divorce proceedings and complete the required documentation. My attorney was shocked by my ex's actions and fully supported my pursuit of primary custody. He filed my divorce decree and secured a temporary restraining order from the judge valid until our initial hearing. While she was in the hospital, we served her the legal papers and scheduled the initial hearing for 2 weeks later. When the initial hearing arrived, she appeared with her attorney. Since it was a pre-litigation hearing, they were unaware of the evidence we possessed. She took the stand and presented a convincing narrative alleging my misuse as the reason for her hospitalization, putting on a seemingly Oscar-worthy performance. However, it was my turn to present our case. My attorney introduced all the evidence, including videos and bank records. The turning point came when my attorney called Amy to the stand as a witness. She recounted a distressing account of a neglectful mother spiraling out of control with worsening substance misuse issues. Throughout Amy's testimony, my ex couldn't keep her composure and remained visibly agitated. Her attorney appeared foolish as her falsehoods were now unraveling and contradicted her previous statements. Once the proceedings concluded, I was granted sole custody while she received supervised visitation until she completed rehab and additional treatment. We reached an out-of-court settlement establishing a progressive visitation schedule once she adhered to rehab and mental health counseling. I retained the house, paying her a portion of the equity, and kept all my investment accounts. I also had the opportunity to spend 80% of the time with my kids. On the other hand, she moved in with her mom for the next 2.5 years and cycled through various jobs. 5 years later, life is quite good, especially knowing that she's no longer my concern. This is my story with my ex. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and she's a 24-year-old girl. I'll keep it concise but share the key details. Initially, everything was fantastic during the first month, like a perfect relationship. We had been friends for some time when she suddenly confessed her feelings for me. I had concealed my emotions because we were supposed to stay just friends, so I seized the chance to express my feelings for her. During the second month, we had a single argument when she invited her neighbor over during what was supposed to be our date. After a good conversation, we resolved the issue and made up. The third month marked the beginning of problems. We had planned a special date, initially set for Friday but later moved to Saturday to accommodate her work schedule. I had kept details about the restaurant we were going to a secret, intending it to be a surprise. Instead of our usual home movie night, I asked her to keep that day free and dressed nicely for the extra special date. However, an hour before the date, she texted me saying she couldn't make it because she had plans to see a movie with a casual friend. I was genuinely angry because I had already paid the pre-booking fee and had informed her over a week in advance. I attempted to call her, but her phone was switched off. I reached out to her best friend, who was also unaware of the situation. The following morning, I spoke with her, and she initiated an argument, claiming I should have informed her it was a special restaurant date. After about an hour of arguing, she eventually acknowledged her mistake and apologized. We decided to take a day off to calm down and clear any lingering negativity from the situation. Subsequently, our relationship began to deteriorate, while I remained the same. She became increasingly distant. After 3 weeks of no intimacy, not even kisses, I confronted her to inquire about the situation. She stated that she needed a week to think and wanted to be single during that time. I expressed my willingness to take a break if it would help but questioned the necessity of being single. She argued that it was for her freedom, and I realized it was for another guy. Consequently, we ended our relationship. However, she began spreading false reasons for our breakup to others, claiming that I had cheated on her and been abusive. Fortunately, the friends she shared her false claims with didn't believe her, as we had all known each other for years, and she had been introduced to them through me. Her best friend had attempted to defend me, but she had blocked him for it. However, he had connections within her friend group, and through them, we uncovered the truth. As it turned out, she had been cheating during the last 3 weeks of our relationship. Remember the casual friend she had gone to the movies with? Well, it was actually a Tinder hookup. She had even tried to start a relationship with him right after our breakup. Unsurprisingly, he wasn't interested and cut off contact by blocking her. Shockingly, this guy had recorded their intimate encounters and uploaded them to adult websites, emphasizing that she was cheating during these encounters. Consequently, this scandal spread like wildfire, forcing her to drop out of university. At that point, I decided I wanted my own form of revenge. While it may not have been the best course of action, I had a close relationship with her parents, who remained oblivious to the situation and assumed we had simply broken up. However, her parents were deeply religious, as was her grandmother, so despite the pain it caused, I managed to locate multiple videos, yes, there were multiple, and downloaded them. I documented our breakup by capturing screenshots of our messages. Then, I reached out to her family to discuss something important. I created a group chat including her parents, grandmother, and former best friend, where I shared the screenshots and videos along with a detailed explanation of what had happened. After this disclosure, there was silence for about a week. Eventually, her ex-best friend filled me in on what was happening. As a result of her actions, she lost her scholarship and had to leave university. Moreover, her grandmother, upon seeing the evidence, removed her from the will and cut ties with her. Consequently, her parents asked her to leave their home and stopped providing financial assistance. Now, she's working a minimum wage job and living with friends to make ends meet.